that doesn't preclude you from starting.
He is.
Mm-hmm.
We have any ETA at all on when?
You said a few minutes after 5.
Is Bud zooming or not?
Well, let's see here.
What is this white?
No, we have one other person, but it's not me. So,
Alright.
this 5 o'clock.
Yep, it is. So it's 5 o'clock. That's what time we're scheduled to begin. Melissa, can I get a call to order and roll call, please?
Elwick.
Here.
Vesenius.
Here.
Parmenter.
Here.
Fluhop.
Here.
Breaker.
Here.
Starkmahood.
Alright, can I get a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Riley, second by Zach. All in favor?
Aye.
Alright, moving on to new business. Gonna have some discussion with Jim and Jimmy tonight. We'll just come on up to the table. We're here at your request. You got some things you wanna talk about?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first one is, after the letter we received to delay our First Amendment for extending the development agreement, and you guys had said you wanted to wait till later in the year to discuss it. And so we're kind of open to the discussions of that.
Okay. So we wanna just listen to what you guys are thinking on an extension. And then we'll probably take that under advisement. I'm not sure what kind of action we are prepared to do tonight. But we do wanna listen to what your plans would be for an extension.
Yeah.
You wanna,
Yeah, and it's basically the same as the one that was sent, I believe, in, was it March or February?
That was in March.
In March. Okay, so same thing, just basically 3 years, things haven't been moving as fast as we had hoped. And, in the spirit of the first agreement, this agreement was always meant to be a living agreement, kind of modified as it goes. Everything's starting to pick up, the roadway's in, should have completion, hopefully first part of January. I mean, pretty much everything signed off. There's a water main that needs to get lowered. That was done by our first contractor. That's at the wrong elevation. That's the biggest thing to get done.
there's a long list of things that weren't done per the original developer's agreement. What's your list of priorities?
As far as you be a little more specific, like what's coming down the road, we do have that commercial lot that we're under contract with Russell Development Group. That will be the potential new USDA building. I believe that's 34.
Lot 34.
Yeah, lot 34. And with J Avenue opening up, they'll open up 7 new residential lots, and also open up the remaining commercial lots with J and 11.
After these finals, the contract that we have for these 7 lots is gonna get delayed until the subdivision gets approved, of course. Then as soon as it gets approved, then those lots will close. That'll only leave us 4 residential lots left, and then the 3 commercial lots. I've got an idea of one of the commercial lots of something we might develop on one of the commercial lots, but besides that, I think, and everybody knows, this whole thing started right about COVID-19 when we did this contract. So we went through 2 years of supply chain mess ups, nobody being able to work, labor force has been reduced, prices on materials and everything else has gone up. So that's kind of what has delayed this project. And I think we're finally getting to the point that we've got the value in place or close to being to the value that we need to be at with the property. Start seeing, you've already seen some property tax come in. I think just ourselves have paid $140,000 on 20
To date, we've paid around $280,000 worth of property tax
over the 2 years.
into the county.
Yeah, 140,000 in 2022 and 140,000, no, 2023 and 2024. So property taxes are starting to come in. Homes that have been built, those will start coming in. I'm sure Dollar General probably is due to start paying taxes, Chris, next year.
It should be,
For Family
this,
Dollar,
the Family Dollar, Dollar Tree should be starting now.
starting now. So the funds are coming in like it has been planned to happen. It just happened, it did not happen as fast as what we hoped.
I'm gonna jump in for just a second. I'm the city attorney and
Yeah.
talking to council about this. I think one of the question was kind of generated under the development agreement. It says that you folks are supposed to complete the minimum improvements. And there's a definition of that, and there's actually an exhibit D, and it describes the minimum improvements. And it's a residential lots to build fourplex units, 12 lots. One commercial lot for use as a gas station or a strip mall. Palmer, when completed, as a senior housing center. Renovation and rehab of old main rice and cottages. Barn renovation and rehab. Hospital renovation and rehab as pub restaurant. Maintenance building renovation and rehab. Rec center renovations and rehab. Now, the way the agreement reads, you agreed to spend $9 million.
We agreed to cause.
Oh, no.
If you read the contract, it says we would cause the development of $9 million.
Yes. And also under your exhibit D, the definition of minimum improvements reads, minimum improvements shall mean the construction of at least $9 million, including but not limited to the following that you listed.
Yep. Including, though, is a key piece of that. In my understanding of the agreement with the council was that the goal was giving you folks the property, $2 million of state money. The goal was that these existing structures would be improved.
And we have done improvements to the structures.
Well,
as
primarily with the $2 million from the state?
No,
So-
including it.
Yeah.
Okay. And we agree, don't we, that that $2 million doesn't count towards the $9 million?
Correct.
Well, I'm not sure we agree on the definitions, as far as adding, because I think what you sent to the city, to Chris too, talks about, kind of asserts that value being added. It doesn't really talk about money being spent, it talks about value being added. And the other thing I wanted to be sure, because when I look at your request, I'm not sure just an extension solves it. Keeping in mind that the rebate provisions of the agreement only apply. One, you've got to meet the $9 million, and we can argue about how you get there. But if you're eligible, the rebates are only tied to the value, the increment added on the commercial lots. Nothing to do with residential. Some of the residential is eligible for a tax abatement, but when it comes to the tax rebates, it's all tied to the increment created by commercial development on those specific lots identified as lots 30, 33, 34, 35, and 36. We on the same page there?
No.
Okay.
When you say tax rebates, are you talking TIF,
Yes.
tax incremental financing?
We're talking about TIF rebates that the agreement says the increment created on those commercial lots, let's say it's $100,000 of new taxes that gets paid in a year. The agreement says you get $50,000 of that.
Right.
Yep. On the commercial lots only.
No. Correct me if I'm wrong, the TIF developed area is the whole project site.
It's an
You're-
urban
you're
renewal
talking urban
area.
Or would
Yeah,
Urban
no, the
renewal,
multifamily stuff was set as a tax abatement, and we have the
Yeah.
commercial set
Yeah,
as
but-
TIF.
but if you have an urban, just because you have an urban renewal district doesn't mean it applies to
That's-
TIF.
Yeah, that's something. Is Matt headphone on?
Yeah, Matt is on. I can, yes. Hello, Matt?
There we go. Yep, I'm on. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So, Matt, your input on the TIF for the development there, for the whole development?
Well, so right, so there, the I'm sorry, the city attorney, could you repeat what you said? I had a hard time hearing that.
Yeah, you bet, Matt. I said when it comes to the development agreement and the payment of a rebate, the agreement provides that 1/2 of the increment or 1/2 of the new tax dollars that come to the city that are tied to commercial development on the specified lots, which according to the Amendment 1 to the development agreement are lots 30, 33, 34, 35, and 36. Those are the lots that when developed create increment that would be eligible to be rebated to the Hobarts. The residential development and even multifamily residential, those developments are eligible for some tax abatement, but the value added by those is not increment subject to division with the Hobarts.
Yeah, I don't think I have the First Amendment, so I can't speak to that. But broadly stated, yeah, my understanding that there's the urban renewal area was with respect to certain lots. I don't know exactly what they were, but I know that the abatement was for the residential lots.
Okay, so I think we're on the same page. And Matt, just for clarity, that First Amendment that you don't have access to, the original development agreement identified a certain number of lots by numbers that I think were numbers that were tied to kind of a plan on paper at that time, and those numbers ended up not actually being the lot numbers. So the First Amendment purely was intended to clarify what lot numbers that were being talked about consistent with the preliminary and final plat.
Got it. Okay. All right. And so you're saying that the lots in the First Amendment that pertain to the TIF are the commercial lots in the northwesterly corner?
Yes, it would be on the northwesterly corner. Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Are there plans for multifamily units?
No.
Yeah, I would like just to kind of reiterate, or just kind of go off of what Jim was saying about the types of improvements. I mean, I appreciate this Exhibit D that talks about specific minimum improvements. The list was, as drafted, it's including but not limited to. So it's not intended to be an exclusive and exhaustive list of the types of items that would be constructed. The Hobarts have had to battle, as he's indicated, COVID, supply chain, employment issues, increased rates, and I'm not sure exactly if there's some hesitancy on the council's part for granting an extension, but it sounds to me like they're making a lot of progress out there, and I still take issue with the characterization that someone doing the work to cause this construction to complete, having that not be included in the $9 million. It's not the plain language of the document. And again, we're not trying to make this combative with the city, but it's clear that the Hobarts have made great strides out there when no one else was doing it. And from my perspective, a request for a reasonable extension is warranted here.
Matt, back to Exhibit D for just a moment to clarify one last time. I agree it does say including but not limited to the following, which to me means those things listed are going to happen, but there might be more. And I can't speak for the council, but again, I go back to the fact that this is somewhat of a historic site. There was a desire in the community that these old properties be renovated and rehabbed and preserved. In addition to other commercial residential development, that's all good and well. And I wasn't part of the original negotiations or discussions of this agreement, so it's secondhand information I'm getting. But when I read Exhibit D as saying including but not limited to, I read those items as being mandatory, plus other items that could be added in addition to.
I'd like to step in. So every building out there is being utilized. There's not a vacant building. They're all being preserved. just to clarify to your point of
Okay.
saying the community wants them preserved, they're all being utilized in some capacity or another.
With, just for an example, because I don't know the site and I don't know the buildings, Palmer Hall, when completed as a senior housing center, is that in the books or is it going to happen?
That was an idea that we had
Okay.
and had worked with a group about it. The group backed out during COVID-19. They run nursing homes and they incurred a lot of financial costs for that.
Okay.
But that building is 100% occupied and used.
And that's part of it too. AmeriCorps did not want to move out of Palmer. And when you have a renter that's, especially a commercial renter like AmeriCorps, you really don't want to lose them or get on their bad side. So we've been, I think Jimmy's done a great job. I think everybody out there's done a great job to keep AmeriCorps happy and keep AmeriCorps here, which is a positive for the city of Benton.
So what I'm hearing is you want a 3-year extension?
Correct.
So with that 3-year extension, then would you then be trying to complete these minimum improvements that are included in this, or?
So
Yes.
we, not the complete list, but the project has kind of changed dependent upon the need of the community. If there are people that want to build single family homes and that's what's selling in the community, that's what we need to allow people to do. As far as the commercial stuff, Palmer Hall, AmeriCorps is going to stay there. The barn renovation, rehabilitation, we've been searching for someone that would be interested in doing that. We've had a few bites, but nothing substantial. Nothing ever came out of it. That's something, we're actively pushing for to find the right person. We're not just sitting on it. All the buildings have, they've needed quite a bit of work. I believe when the state left, just on their deferred maintenance list, I want to say there was around $400,000 worth of just deferred maintenance. We've tackled pretty much every problem in that building, in all the buildings on the campus, even a few that we didn't know about, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, we're doing everything we can to keep it preserved and keep AmeriCorps there.
So you wanna stick with the 9 million, or?
Yeah.
Well, you could cut it down if you'd like. We'd be fine with that.
I'm thinking inflation increase it, but.
Well, inflation almost works the opposite on us, but it's just trying to get those commercial spaces filled. The hospital or the barn. We had some drawings done up for an event space there, and that may still happen. But right now, we're utilizing it as our shop to keep equipment in and work out of as our shop.
What's going on with the old hospital pub?
We just got a call the other day from the realtor. Matter of fact, it was just yesterday, and there's somebody interested that wants to open up a business in there, but they haven't told us what the business is, so we can't tell them if we'll rent it to them or not yet. So we're kind of pushing back and forth to see what kind of business they're talking about.
And we've had, 2 different groups through there in the past 6 months or so. It's just, I don't know if it's signs of the economy or what, but it's tough out there right now for commercial businesses, it seems.
Tough for restaurants, yeah. We have one in Cedar Rapids that's struggling.
So I wanna hop back, let's just talk about the sidewalk improvements.
Okay.
Is that on anybody's radar?
Well,
Is that
as
part
far
of
as-
part of,
I've heard that there's a sidewalk program through the city, and we'll look at that.
Which sidewalks are we talking about?
Yeah.
Can you
The ones that
specify?
are required in the residential subdivision,
for
yeah,
new builds, yeah.
that's part of the contract.
Yeah, so that whole issue with them, in our covenants for that subdivision, it clearly states that they're responsible for having sidewalks installed, the builder is. We went through one of our attorneys, they contacted their attorney, they ended up putting in the sidewalks. It's a very plain thing in our covenants that states they must put in sidewalks.
We're joined by our other attorney, Mr. Dave Grosclaws on
Was he on?
cell phone. So
Sitting right next to me.
Oh.
So the sidewalk thing, that's our ordinance, any new developments have the developer putting sidewalks in, correct?
yes, that is in our ordinance.
And that precludes, covenances?
Ordinances usually do
That's
preclude.
what I'm asking.
Yes, they do.
Usually, or do?
They always do, unless they're legal covenants. But I'm not going to get into that. This is neither the time nor place
Alright.
for that.
So
I'm just asking.
If a neighborhood covenants are more restrictive or require more than the ordinances, then the people subject to them would have to go to that higher standard. I think the deal here was the development agreement spoke to the fact that Hobart was gonna have to put sidewalks in and pay for sewer and water connection fees. At least what happened so far in the residential area, that fell on the guy building the houses, as I understand.
Yep.
Hey, Dave, can you hear me? Dave Grosclaws?
Yes, I can hear you, yes.
Hey, this is Doug Herman. I've got a microphone pretty close to the phone here. I think this discussion has come up in the past too, and you were involved in the development agreement and the many, many drafts of it. It's probably nothing for us to decide tonight necessarily, but I think one point of potential dispute between the Hobarts and the city is how to interpret the language of the development agreement when it comes to the $9 million in investment. Whether that $9 million was expected of Hobart, or if the use of the word clause throughout the agreement, along with other terms, opens the door to saying that it doesn't matter who spends the $9 million, anybody who is building, if you will, on the property, so long as the expenses of Dollar General, for example, the expenses of any other commercial developers, arguably, I'll say expenses of residential developers. In your involvement in the negotiation of this agreement, what's your take on that? Can the developer add the costs of anything and everything put into this property by anybody, or is it tighter than that?
Yeah, it was supposed to be $9 million of Hobart's money. That was the quid pro quo for receipt of all the land along with the VSB buildings.
Okay. And I only bring that up because I knew you were definitely involved in the documents. I wasn't, and I've talked to the council different times, and that at least that's the position I'm hearing from them. The position of the developer is that's not the intent of the agreement. That it's more about overall investment. So I just wanted to get your take on that.
I think if it does come down to TIF is only allowed on the 4 commercial lots, $9 million is ridiculous. There's no way you're gonna spend $9 million on these 4 lots.
Well, I would say this. I don't know that the $9 million has to be spent on those 4 lots. I just think it's the taxes generated by those lots that create the money that's eligible for increment.
Pay that before.
Yep.
That's what that is. But to the issue of the whole cost thing, I mean, we can argue that till everyone turns blue in the face. Nothing would have happened out here if it wasn't for us to take over the property, subdivide it, sell the lots, that's causing it to happen.
And again, we can argue about that. And
Yeah.
as a follow-up question, let's just say for argument's sake that your interpretation is right. Do you believe 9 million has been spent?
Right.
Probably
Because
pretty
what the
close.
city received from you guys yesterday or today was more about value, that 9 million in values exists. But you think 9 million's been spent by someone.
Well, yeah, when you say the word spent, that's not the word I would use. I would use, we have caused a value to be increased by 9 million.
Okay.
And just like the infrastructure cost $2 million to put the streets and the sewer and water stuff in,
Or not.
you can't elevate that to a retail value and say, okay, well that 2 million should be worth $3 million. It's really what the value actually is.
Has there been provided, I have not seen a valuation to show how there's a concept of reaching 9 million?
We have not received anything that would spell out, I'll say 9 million in expenses by various parties. What the city did receive, and I think it got forwarded to you, Dave, anyway, was more of a page or two outlining suggested value added.
Right. And some of it is actual. The hospital, we use some of the money from the state to rehab it. We use some of our own money too. The actual value we came up with was that HHR put in $270,000 of money into the rehab of the pub. The rest came from the demo and rehab fund.
I guess one comment I'd make then, obviously understand what's being requested. My 2 cents would be that if there's going to be an extension or an agreement of sorts, it would be wise not to just say we're extending this for 3 years. It'd be wise to say we're extending it, but we're going to make other things clear while we're doing it. If that's the direction the council would go, clarifying what cause means, clarifying it, Exhibit D, that in my opinion were things that were agreed to, what's still expected there, what's not expected. For benefit of everybody, I think if there's any kind of an extension, some clarity on those issues would be wise.
So would that be a new developer's agreement?
Should just be an amendment.
Once you know if this contract specifically ends as of January 1, 2025, would we have to do a new agreement since this one was technically done? Get an amendment in before that date?
I think there's some flexibility. Dave, I don't know if you heard that question. The question was, technically this agreement has a deadline of January 1/25 to complete the minimum improvements. The question is if the council was of a mind to amend the agreement to do some things, and they did that after the 1st of January, would that be permissible in your mind, or would they basically just need to create a new development agreement?
I'd have to take a look at the valuations and what exactly wanted to be done. I think it would depend on how significant the changes would be.
Yeah.
As to whether it's just easier to have a new agreement, or if they were minor changes, then no, I would think you could just amend this. But if there are significant changes, you should probably consider a new agreement.
And whose dime would that be on?
Whose dime would it be on?
Whose expense
Cities,
would
or
it be to
be the developer?
That could be negotiated between the two parties.
Yeah.
But I would also like to point out, so section 5.3 actually gives till December 31st, 2025 for the minimum improvements to be undertaken and completed. So the document's still technically living until then.
I asked about that provision. I don't know what your memory is on that. When I asked about that provision, at least some of the council's opinion was that the idea there was for things that were ongoing, started and moving, that there'd be time to complete them. Because most of the language of the agreement speaks to, for example, 4.4D, the project cost for the minimum improvements must have cost at least $9 million by January 1, 2025. And typically, the January 1, 2025 date is what appears throughout.
Except for in 5.3.
Yeah, you are not wrong.
That's correct.
Yep.
And I think that speaks to the idea of this whole thing when it was negotiated. It was always going to be a evolving project. Not everything that was set as a idea was gonna for sure happen. It's about adjusting to the community needs and wants more than just spelling out right from the start, hey, this is what's gonna happen. I mean, we can't force people to buy what they don't want, and can't force businesses to come in during rougher economic times.
So this is just to clarify in my own mind, going back to that 9 million, the residential lots that have already been sold
Correct.
and built and are on the tax base. Are you counting that at whole cost?
In
Towards-
our opinion, the sale price of that is the value added.
Is that the price of the lot or the house?
The house, the total thing, that's part of the project.
That's value added.
That's
not-
value added.
Okay.
In the definition section of the agreement, there's a definition for project cost, because again, this agreement, 9 million is a lot of money, it is, but the agreement doesn't talk about adding value. The agreement talks about spending 9 million, and again, we covered what's that mean, who spends it, and we can debate that, but it's about spending money. It isn't about what's that
It's
house
not-
now
right,
worth,
it's
what's
about
it,
expense, not about the increment of value.
not about the sale price, not about the assessed value, it's about how much was spent in this 40-some acres. And project costs include reasonable and customary hard and soft costs typically associated with the acquisition, development, construction, and preparation of the real property for use, including without limitation, land acquisition, design, engineering, environmental, and construction costs related to the real property. So it's a little bit open or broad in the definition as to what all can be added in. But the agreement's pretty clear that when we're dealing with the 9 million, it's about money spent. And the agreement provides the city can ask for evidence of that money spent as part of the analysis. And so while I understand the argument that, kind of argument, why shouldn't we be looking at value? Because we have added a lot of value. The agreement says penny spent.
Right.
So that's just what it says.
So if someone buys a house, for example, for $200,000, someone spent $200,000 to
No, but-
purchase that.
Yeah, they did spend it, but it's about what the guy spent to build it.
So if you would have put the water
So
and
from
sewer and
Kevin's
the sidewalk
cost-
in, that would have gone towards your 9 million. But the house being built doesn't go towards your 9 million.
Well, that's in his interpretation it doesn't, but in our interpretation it does. Somebody's come along and spent $200,000 to buy a house. That is money that we have caused to be spent. So that correlates to their assessment, that correlates to property taxes. So if you got $9 million of money spent, I don't know how, if there's a figure you could even correlate to what the taxes should be coming in off of 9 million spent. But what we're looking at is the dollar amount that we caused to be constructed and spent on the project.
So when we add up the 9 million, do we count the money the contractor spent to build the house and the money spent by the person to buy the house? Both?
I would say just to buy the house.
Just to buy the house.
The one-time payment for the house.
what happens, one contractor might make 10% on a house, another contractor might make 40% on a house. So how do you can't discern that.
Yeah, I don't think I will agree on that point. I think it's not money spent by somebody coming in and buying a property that's been constructed.
spent
It's
on
the
the
money spent to
improvements.
create the improvement, would be my take.
Spent on the improvements is how I would interpret it.
We did just a little math just for information. If the Hobarts had submitted a request by October 15th on the agreement for rebate for 24, okay, and the council, city had found, we got a timely request, we find all of the prerequisite requirements of the agreement to be met, we're gonna certify for TIF and pay them. The amount of increment that would have been paid next year to Hobarts would have been a little over $10,000, based upon the incremental growth on the commercial properties eligible for TIF. It was like 24,000.
Yeah, right under
Some-
24.
So it would have been about 10 to 12,000 would have been half of that.
Right under 24.
I'd also point out, and this is kind of a unique factor, but when the Hobarts received the property and it went from non-taxable to taxable, it was assessed at a total valuation of $4,043,200. No, take that back. $4,388,300. It has now a total taxable valuation of $4,043,000. So the overall value of that property has gone down by $345,000 because of either the assessor taking it on his own volition to change the taxation of some of the parcels, or requests from the owners, and I don't know that. But a couple of the buildings have seen significant tax adjustments where they were valued here and now they're valued here. So the overall value of that property from the date they acquired it to now has gone down by $345,000, even with the improvements. But before they owned it, it was creating zero tax. That's a true statement too.
And the assessment could have been $100 million, and the state was still going to pay $0 in taxes.
Do you have any plans ready to present for construction in 2025?
We have nothing written in stone for 2025, no. The lots are listed, we field every call that we can, but just don't see a whole lot of commercial new build going on right now.
I think we're supposed to hear about that USDA one in
I think
first part of this year. I think first quarter of 25 is when they'll make their final decision, if not sooner. Yeah, the commercial market is bleak.
There's a lot of stuff there to digest, a lot of information. You guys have questions for Hobarts? Doug? What are you laughing at? So ideally, with your extension and amendments, what would be your ask, total ask?
Just to extend it 3 years.
Yeah.
That's-
hopefully we can get some commercial buildings in there within the next 3 years.
Yeah, we're not asking for any adjustment to the value, no money, no anything except just a time frame extension.
So question, if we do a 3-year extension, and we have to redo the developer's agreement, is cause still gonna be in there?
I think what Doug said is that if we were to do that, we would try to get a better definition.
Well, that, yeah.
Come to an understanding of what's,
Yeah,
yeah, I can't say whether it's gonna be in there or not, it really is, comes down to what, if the council says, we're willing to sit down and look at an extension, but we want some clarification on what terms mean and what we expect and what we wanna see. You know, again, I guess it goes back to, I'm at a bit of a disadvantage because I didn't hear all these conversations early on, but I guess I go back to the fact that we've got all these existing kind of historic buildings, and I understand they're being preserved, but again, my understanding was you folks were hoping that they wouldn't just be preserved, but that they'd be renovated and rehabbed and put to a use, not just sitting there preserved.
They are being used though, you keep
Not
saying
all.
that.
Are they all?
Which one, name one that's not.
Well, I know.
I mean, I know, cause you're not familiar with the property, but
Which is
they're
what
all
I-
being used.
Which is what I said. that I'm not
I
familiar
know,
with
but
it.
you just stated you wanted, that they wanted them all to be preserved and to be used,
Rehabbed and renovated is the words of Exhibit D.
and you said used.
Rehabbed
They all
and-
are currently being used.
I don't know if you guys
I
agree with that or not, knowing the property, I don't know.
We have a lease with the federal government that they lease every single one of those buildings on site except for the old hospital pub
And the barn.
and the barn, which we use.
Do they use a shop too then?
The service building, the old service
Oh,
building,
yeah.
yeah.
That's all
And
there's.
even the metal building
They would
across
have
the
to.
ninth.
Yes.
When you start talking about historic buildings, and we've done a few of them, you've gotta find a use for a historic building when it's rehabbed. You can rehab every building you want to, but if you can't find a use that is viable to maintain that building, then you've got a negative project.
Mhm.
So if we restore, if we could find a senior housing, say AmeriCorps decides to pull out of here in a year or two, then yeah, we're gonna be scrambling to find possibly some, memory care company or something that we could get into Palmer. But we're not gonna boot AmeriCorps out until they decide to leave. Then that's when we'll have to pull up our boots and look at rehabbing a building.
Initially, the plan was for AmeriCorps to maybe hopefully take over more of Old Main and exit Palmer, but that's kind of been shown to be cost prohibitive and not really super agreeable.
So our Old Main Rice and the cottages are one of the items listed. Are those all part of the AmeriCorps lease?
Yes.
Recreation Center?
Yep.
And they're actually, well, I guess.
They
I guess
rent
what's
it.
throwing me is we talk about renovation and rehab to be done, 9 million by January of 25. And what you folks are saying is, it may say that, but that doesn't make sense because we don't have a need for it, or that we don't have somebody to do it, or to use it, or to identify how
to
to.
use it, to who's gonna come in and rent from us, or who's gonna come in and buy the building when we've got a rehab to a historic value. Because there's a lot of things in historic value that won't fly in those buildings right now.
Yeah, and I would say, this doesn't require that they be restored to any historic value necessarily. When I'm throwing that term out, I guess I should say those existing buildings, that there was a desire that they be preserved and used in some fashion, whether
Yeah,
If
they
you
are
would've
being
walked through those
preserved.
buildings after the state pulled out of there,
Yeah.
these buildings are 100% better. There was stuff lined up in the hallways that they didn't wanna throw out to the trash because it cost money to dispose of. There were neon lights up and down the hallways. There's furniture that was broken, just sitting in the hallways. We had 100+ dumpsters, full roll-off dumpsters, hauled out of all those buildings. So if you don't count that as rehabbing or refurbishing, I don't know.
I will attest there was a lot of stuff in there.
Mhm.
I was in those halls, Jim.
And if you start talking about historics, I think we've got a little more knowledge about historics than what you're throwing out there. So I wouldn't use the word historic quite yet, because if you do, you're limiting yourself a lot on what the buildings can be used for.
Yeah, I corrected myself saying I should use the word existing, because I think that was the desire that those existing buildings
And
be
they've all
dealt
been
with.
preserved.
Yeah.
And they're all in use.
And maybe the development agreement shouldn't have used the words renovation and rehabilitation.
Well, that was back to one of our first conversations that we had with a group, was their desire to go to like it would be a memory care and nursing home, standard typical nursing home for Palmer. It ended up that didn't work out. COVID hit, everything went kind of belly up on that. That's what I was talking about as far as a renovation. If we could have emptied that building out by shifting AmeriCorps around, and then it would have been rehabbed to suit their needs.
I think the bottom line is, we need to get to a point where we have a black and white agreement between both of us. It's getting kind of controversial between us, and that's not gonna help anything. For us to walk away isn't gonna help anything. For you to put clamps on us that are not realistic isn't gonna help anything. So I think if we just come up with a contract that is black and white, and we don't have a whole lot of gray areas, that's where we need to be.
What do you mean by walk away?
We can hand you the keys to the buildings if you want. You wanna take them over? Gotta tell you, the line to take this whole project over was one company only, and that was us. There's nobody else interested.
I don't know if we have a lot of confidence in black and white. This was revised how many times?
Yeah, I agree 100%, because it always seems like there's some words that are in that gray area.
There are some that are
Yeah.
completely gray. There are some that are absolutely spot on. I mean, it's highlighted in capital letters. It shall cost. The improvements must have a cost, C-O-S-T, capital letters, at least $9 million. And that cost. That's one spot that sticks out. But there's different ways to look at everything. I don't know what, I think if we talk to the people that put this together, I get the general feeling that they fully anticipated that this was going to cost $9 million of money spent by you guys. There was a great big group of people that got together on this. It's just frustrating for everybody, including yourselves, but I don't know how much confidence I have in putting another one of these together.
Yeah, I wasn't here when this was
Yeah,
developed, so.
yeah. I don't know. I mean, so yeah.
So if we were to do that, that would then be a completely new.
Well,
Am I right?
as Dave said when we asked about it, I mean, it isn't so much about the timing of this, it's more about the significant or substantial
How many
nature of
changes
potential
are we doing?
changes. It might make more sense if there's gonna be some significant changes, corrections, modifications, just to try to look at where we're at today and what the council wants to see from today forward, and replace this agreement with whatever that is.
So where we're at right now, we need to let them have a small extension, just so we can get this worked out to figure out where we're going. So we
Not-
can,
Maybe necessarily. They're saying that maybe that's not necessary.
well, I'm just
Yeah.
saying that
What's
we
our
need to
timeline?
talk about this
Yes, we do.
amongst us. We have one more council meeting before the end of the year.
Yep.
So, if we give them a month extension, that's 2 council meetings in between there, just to get this worked out between us. Is that?
I understand where you're going with that. In my mind, unless the council, until the council takes action contrary to the agreement, or action to, say, terminate the agreement, until then, the agreement kind of still would stand, even though that January 1/25 date may have passed.
Okay, I didn't
So
know
we
if
have
that
buffer.
would,
Yeah, so I don't think we need to worry about a 1 or 2 or 3 month extension. I just think we know what they're requesting.
Okay.
We know there's some discussion points where Dave, myself, don't necessarily agree with the developer and their attorney on what some of these words might mean and how we value the 9 million, for example. And definitely, if this is going to be some kind of extension moving forward, clarity on that point is important. I think we have clarity, our understanding, at least on the issue of where the increment would come from. And the increment comes from the commercial development on those specific lots. But to be eligible for the increment, then we're back to the 9 million. So how do we do the math on the 9 million so that we can be agreeable that that 9 million has been met or not met? Because until it's met, even if there's increment available to be distributed, it doesn't get distributed. That 9 million is kind of the precursor to that. A condition precedent is how it's described in the agreement. And therefore, until the 9 million is met on terms that we agree upon as to what that means, once it is met, then they're eligible to receive 50% of the increment created by the development on those commercial lots. Okay? So there's a lot of other terms in here that we could argue about. I think the key one is 9 million and what that means. How to add it up.
And baby steps for me, the way that works is they turn in receipts to you yearly.
Yeah, normally that's how it's done, and the timelines are clearly stated in the agreement as well as in state law, also in Iowa code. So, October 15th.
October 15th is when the
Yes.
draw needs to be submitted?
Yes, that's state law. That's always been in the agreement. That's
Okay,
always
'cause
state law.
I could have sworn 2023 you told me it had to be in by the end
No,
of November.
no. December 1 is when we submit it to the county auditor
Okay.
for certification for the next year. But in order to have things brought to us so we can be prepared to, it'll be October 15th.
Yeah, the agreement provides October 15th.
Yes, and
Nonetheless.
also Iowa code does as well.
Okay. And is it just an invoice that we submit, or?
It would be, I would have to sit down at the end of the project or the end of the improvements to go over those invoices on what is actually considered TIF eligible and what's not TIF eligible.
Talking original invoice from the contractor, or are you talking
Typically,
something they generate?
typically it's always the original invoices from the contractor because our auditors will ask for those for certification purposes.
So supervision on our part
Mhm.
can also be submitted on the invoice.
It can, but yes, it would. The agreement does state soft cost on that. I have to double check with Dave on
Counting, yeah.
and with Doug on the exact specifics of those.
Okay.
You absolutely should.
Just so I'm clear, this is a yearly deal. If improvements were done calendar year 2021, are they turned in that calendar year?
No, because if they're done in 2021, it's for 18 months
Yep.
prime
So they would,
because of the way taxes work.
yes. But is there due dates on these invoices that get turned in for work done?
Yes, there are due dates.
I would say, from an invoice standpoint, what contractors are spending,
Yeah.
that's really only important. However we decide what the 9 million means, again, whatever's requested, once that 9 million is
Yeah,
exceeded,
yeah.
then we don't need any of that anymore. The annual certification is a little different than it, because
Right.
even those invoices aren't really tied to the annual certification.
Right.
Those are just tied to showing that they're eligible.
Yep.
And once they're eligible, then the annual certification comes in. Then it's pretty straightforward as to, we know what commercial lots are in play, and we know what the base valuation of those lots are.
Yep.
And then we'll know what the new value is based on the development and how much increments being created,
Right.
and they get half and the city gets half.
Yeah, once you hit the point of it,
Yeah.
then it just becomes an automatic thing on an annual basis, which I typically bring to you guys
Yeah.
on the last meeting in November. We just did it last
Or-
month.
For the new edition?
Actually, we did it the first meeting in November. We were ahead of schedule. So, but yes, it's a process.
So it would seem, if nothing se, tonight, not that this is on the agenda for action or any decisions, but my take on some of your comments is, in my opinion, is that at a minimum, the agreement requires $9 million in expenses. And in my opinion of that is, let's say we even include the guy building the houses. That would be his expenses. It wouldn't be the sale price of the house. It would be the expenses of the guy who built the Dollar General, because obviously that didn't get sold. He built it and leasing it, so we don't have a sale price there per se. So to me, it's the inputs. And if we wanted to get a feel for the inputs to know where we are, that's what we'd ask for. You know, and for Hobart's, that's going to be a job, because it isn't their inputs. It's the inputs of this house builder. It's the inputs of the Dollar General person. They spent money on the street, so that could be figured out. An administrative estimate cost for their supervision and whatnot, engineering fees. But in my opinion, even if we include the cost of all of that stuff, residential construction, you name it, towards the $9 million, that would be actual money spent on 2x4s, money spent on a roofing contractor, concrete. That would be the expenses put into the things being developed on this site. So, if you wanted to know where that was at, as opposed to, and again, I'm not disputing, I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with what Hobart submitted, saying here's value added, but again, the agreement doesn't speak to value added;
Right.
It speaks to cost. So,
Right.
I think we need, if we shift over to the cost side of things, and the council's interested in knowing how close we are to $9 million of actual inputs into the property. And you want to, that's the number in the agreement, right or wrong. You want to see where you're at, that's what would be requested.
Aren't you stepping into some private information with a builder of what it costs him to build a building?
Probably.
Yeah, I don't.
But I think, again, you've got an agreement with the city, and you're saying, we understand, we think it applies to all that stuff. Your agreement with that builder should have been, our agreement is, we're going to sell you lots, but you got to share with us that cost.
That's where we'll disagree on cost versus someone purchasing a property on the project.
So what is
That's
the
a
Dollar
cost.
General attributed value then?
We could do that multiple ways, either off of building appraisal, building permits.
So we're doing it different ways for different things.
Well,
To get it attainable, I mean, we could reach out to them and see if they'd be willing to share that, since that's, not,
Okay.
we don't
So
have a
you
public
said, to Doug's
agent
point,
disclose.
we're
That's where
we're reading the same word
the-
two different ways.
Right.
yeah,
And because I agree with Doug, it's expense, not increment of value. That's how I interpret the $9 million.
Yep.
The investment put in.
and if someone buys a house, aren't they investing that money?
They're buying something somebody else invested
And yeah, they're
in building.
buying us. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure we can all argue it
Yeah, we can.
till our faces
We
are blue.
definitely can.
That's,
Never mind. I just think you
Well, the reason that it gets brought up is just how far away we are from each other going forward. If we're not anywhere close, then why would we go forward? If we can't get past the shall cause as a group, how much further do we go? You know what I mean? And that's the question we gotta figure out.
That's why we all need to get together and talk about this.
Yeah, that's true. You had something?
No, I was just thinking about just only something they'll probably understand it on the property that are attributed to tax abatement versus the ones that are considered for incremental value, and adding that up, and because those are two. I've always told council those are two opposite,
Yes.
absolute opposite things of incremental value versus abatement. You can't have one. You can't do both. It is
The one affects the owner of
no, just the nature of how it's done. Because one, in order to get increment, you have to collect taxes.
Oh.
But abatement doesn't allow you to collect
Collect taxes.
taxes.
But the definitions of the agreement, again, not to keep getting back into the weeds here a bit, but when we talk about minimum improvements, you know, conditions precedent, before any rebates get paid, it says project costs. Project costs for the minimum improvements must have cost at least $9 million by January 1/25. Then we jump to the definition of what is a minimum improvement. It means the construction, renovation, rehabilitation, improving of real property and existing buildings to be used for residential, senior housing, and commercial buildings such as gas stations, blah, blah, blah. So it's construction, renovation, rehabilitation, improving. It isn't the purchasing of, okay? And that's, again, we could point to a lot of provisions here. There's nothing in here anywhere that suggests the $9 million is based upon what somebody paid for something. It's tied to the renovation, the construction, the rehabilitation, the improving of real property. So,
And that was very intentional. And that's why, as well, must have cost as a qualifier for project costs for minimum improvements. That was all very intentional.
because there is, again, like Dave's saying, 2 definitions down from minimum improvements is project costs. And, you know, it doesn't speak to a project cost being what somebody paid for a house.
Right.
It's all of these inputs. And intentional, I can't speak to the mindset of the council when that was intentional, why that was the desire of the council at the time to do it that way, but it was, in my opinion, and Dave was definitely involved. So,
Yes.
anyway.
Well, the intentional aspect was that was a number that ultimately it was felt through, then going to the tax increment, the value that would start to be equal to the value of the transfer of the land in the first, along with the buildings in the first place. So that number, it was felt, if and only if there were at least costs in the area of at least $9 million, and then you would start to look then at the minimum improvements after the cost equal $9 million that would start to get you to a level of tax increment produced that would start to give you an equivalency for the amount or I'll say value of the land and the buildings that were transferred.
So where we sit tonight, I think we understand what's being requested anyway. Extension of time to keep moving forward and to continue to be eligible for increment. And in the meantime, along with that, as we've discussed, I think the council needs to think about if that's to happen, how you would like to see some of these other terms and provisions clarified, stay the same. Yeah. If you think, when I say stay the same, if you think they need to stay as we interpret them, then we need to say that and maybe clarify that in whatever kind of an amendment or new agreement there is. But I think we, at least I have a good understanding of what Hobart's opinion and arguments are, and you've heard Dave, and you've heard my take, and you've had your own takes. So I think now the next step is just further consideration by the council.
Sounds right.
I agree.
Yep.
We're at a bit of an impasse at the moment.
Well, tonight wasn't for a decision. It
Right.
was
Right.
You're
to
right.
talk through these things, so that's good.
Anybody have anything further for Hobart's? You guys have anything further for us?
Don't think so.
Not at this time.
Okay.
Kind of anxious to hear what,
Hatched a lot of it now. Where everyone
hear what you
stands.
guys, yeah, have to say.
Chargers and Broncos in an hour.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
All right,
I-
thank you.
motion
Dave, I
to
think we're done
adjourn.
with you for now.
You have a motion with that, or what?
Separately, or maybe you wanna talk tomorrow?
Yeah, why don't you and Chris catch up tomorrow?
I'll be here tomorrow.
Okay.
That'll work?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Second.
I've got a pretty open discussion in the morning.
Okay, thanks much.
Okay, all right, thanks.
I missed Riley and
Exactly.
That was a motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
Okay. Adjourn.
Aye.
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 Okay.